question I was going to ask you was, how do you think, what do you think would be, how do you think in this current age, how do you think people who want to see a better world, who want this basically, who are, I guess I'll use the word the left broadly, but this could be, I guess, in what I'm saying, I guess I'm thinking the further left, but this could also be moderates. Because right now the right is, under Donald Trump, is winning the airwaves. How do you think people can win the airwaves in this day and age?
I do think you have to have a certain ability to make a spectacle. I think about when Cory Booker went and did his 24-hour filibuster, but then he didn't back that up. Like the next day, he voted on something that was, giving into Trump. I'm a big fan of AOC. I've been a big fan of her since she came into Congress, and she has an ability to speak clearly about issues, but also to use social media, to use the voice, speak in such a way that sort of a plain person might speak. There's an argument that says, well, maybe the best person for this, and it's sort of terribly depressing, but if you can find an older white dude who can have the same principles, maybe that's how you win. So it's a Tim Walz or a Pritzker. But all of those people are dynamic personalities that I just met. So you need to have someone that's going to have some kind of dynamic. I think that the age of having Chuck Schumer's of the world, I hate to pick on him, but he's just such an easy target. Because he has zero charisma. That's not how he won. That you're going to have to see people who have a little bit of fight. And you can watch even someone like when Pete Buttigieg ran in 2016. He ran as a very soft-spoken person, and since then, in the last 8 years, he's been going on to Fox News and actually taking the ideas to the opposition, and the left has taken note. He used to be seen as sort of persona non grata by the left, and now it's like, oh, well, maybe he could form a coalition. And I think that's the key word. Is what you need to do is you need to build a coalition, and we're right now at the point where people are trying to figure out what that looks like. I'm just enough into sort of the left-leaning part of Blue Sky to say that there's just a lot of people who will never vote for Gavin Newsom because of how he's dealt with unhoused folk in California and how he's dealt with his ideas on trans people. Same with Emmanuel, who used to be mayor of Chicago and was in Obama's administration, who was also taken to it. You need to find someone who's going to be able to not throw marginalized people under the bus, at the same time speaking to people for whom marginalized people are not necessarily part of their everyday life. This is going back to something you said. You said that this was the part of the question that I couldn't remember that I wanted to respond to. You said that I have taken some time off of social media, and especially the more darker parts like Fox News and Twitter. And I'll say that the thing you said is, what that creates is it creates a kind of numbing effect where you're sort of numb to everything. Well, another bad thing happened, but that's only possible to divorce yourself from it if it's not interacting with your everyday lives. There are everyday people for whom trans laws are being shifted in ways that are making their lives worse. There are people for whom the ICE are coming to their house or to their baseball games and are evicting them. So to take some time off to breathe is very much a position of privilege, and so it's something that as I start, hopefully once I get a job once I find myself on my feet in terms of employment a little bit more, I'm going to be working on figuring out, all right, well, how can I start to work for those groups of people who are the most marginalized, because they don't have the opportunity to take the time off. And so that's the coalition we need. We need a coalition of the people who are marginalized and the people who care about the marginalized. And you need to hope that group of people is bigger than the people who don't care about marginalized people. And that's where I have just enough in my sort of bleeding heart to think that I do think more people do care about poor people, unhoused people, trans folks, LGBT folks of all kind, minorities in this country. That hopefully, if the right leaders could form that coalition. Obama was really good at it. He did it from left of center kind of position, but I don't think it needs to be from that exact position. Anyone who can build that coalition, I think, would be able to find a way to win.
Yeah, this makes total sense. And you are right that retreatism is a privilege, and it's for many people, particularly people who are marginalized in various ways. The powers that be almost come knocking on their door and prevent the ability to retreat. They invade their space. And people who can retreat are disproportionately people who have the ability to have a space separate that isn't being actively invaded in that way. I also think you're right. I mean, the irony of the pragmatist in me, as much as I would hate to say it, but like an older white guy might actually, who has a strong charisma, might be the most pragmatic way to develop a popularity across the population. As unfortunate as that is, given just given the how much that buys into things like racism and sexism, but in terms of being effective, that might be what is most effective. And I think the irony is, I mean, you're almost, maybe not, but you made me think about Bernie Sanders. So like, he might be too old, whatever. We don't have to go down that rabbit trail, but like a Bernie Sanders take two of like a white guy who talks about these issues. At the same time, I also agree with you that I tend to think talking about economic issues is probably what's going to be most effective across the wide swath of people, maybe particularly working class Americans. I mean, that was something Donald Trump was actually successful at, was dipping into how they felt. And economic issues are, for what you were saying, communities that don't have a lot of minorities in that sense, is still something that galvanizes them, because across the board, we're seeing many people in the U.S. are seeing their life prospects go down, and seeing their options diminish. And being able to tap into that might be the most pragmatic starting place. One thing I'm curious about with the coalition building, I don't know to what extent I actually agree with this argument, but a common argument around Donald Trump is that Trump was effective. Trump did his stuff, built his following with no coalition building, that he focused in on his one group and then built out from that. And then the Democrats tried coalition building and it failed as a response. I guess what do you think about that? To what extent do you think that's accurate? And to what extent do you agree with kind of the, how would you respond to someone who said, I don't think coalition building is the effective strategy. We need to hunker our own, or something like that kind of response. What do you think about that?
I think you're right that if there ever was someone who didn't care about coalition building, it's been Trump. There's been very few moments in his 5+ years of being president, or almost 5 years of being president, where he's had a positive approval rating. He's almost always underwater on approval rating. So that means that he lost 2 of the 3 elections by the popular vote, and didn't get a majority in the 3rd election. He's taking the people that are the most rabid. He's going for a smaller pond, but the fish are really big in the sense that they're voracious and they want to eat on the line. I guess I wonder if there's enough on the other side to do that. If the number, it definitely is possible, because really these elections always come down to, at least since the last time we had true kind of landslide election was 96. I guess the first Obama was pretty much a landslide. But that had all kinds of other factors with, we were in a recession and wars, and there was some 8 years of pretty terrible before that. But for the most part, like, you're playing into the same few states, right? It's Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and I've lived so much of my life in swing states that, like, I've seen it. But, like, for example, I just moved from Wisconsin, and Wisconsin was a total swing state, and this is the thing that the Democrats need to do. Is I watch a lot of I still watch a lot of, like, regular TV that had regular ads, and not only was I in a swing state, but I was in a swing district, and the Democrats weren't running ads about how bad the big bill, beautiful bill was 24/7. Like, and the cynic in me thinks, well, the Democrats actually didn't care if that bill passed, because then they could run against it in 2 years. And it's that kind of thinking that makes people really not want to be part of that party, because they're not really interested in these issues. They're more interested in their self-preservation. I know that that's what Trump does, but it doesn't seem to translate on the left side of things. So what we need to do is you need to be someone who wants to fight not just every 2 years, but wants to fight all the time. And the Republicans seem to be really good at that. I did notice today, though, that Chuck Grassley was putting a hold on some Bush nominations because he's fed up with Iowa gets a lot of their energy from wind these days, and Trump wants to get rid of the wind, not the whole wind, but just the windmills and the wind turbines. And so he's putting a hold on something. And so he doesn't need to care, because he doesn't have to worry about re-election because he's 95 or whatever. I don't know how old he is, but I think he's over 90. But those are the moments. It's like, all right, if you can start fighting in times that aren't 2 years from now, that's what's going to really start to get into people. And Bernie Sanders did this well before his campaign, right? So he ran in 2006, but he had been appearing on Meet the Press for a decade before that, right? And oftentimes seen as like, we have this crazy socialist guy who's mayor of Burlington. He's going to be on our show. And you need more people who are willing to do that. Even Cory Booker, who a lot of people think is a centrist shill. I don't know. I wouldn't say that about him. But, like, I've known him because he used to do the shows, and he did them as the mayor of Newark. And, this guy, he's running for president, but right now he's just mayor of Newark. So you need to find those kinds of people who are willing to do traditional media and also be big on social media, and maybe have a meme about yourself, and maybe do TikTok. And I don't know if that person exists. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I just got cynical at the end there.
This makes total sense. I think one element of this, and I think you've actually been hinting at it throughout our conversation, but this type of thing you just described, of being able to do the fight, of being able to talk the talk in a social media in this current social media landscape, to be able to do this, to this type of activity, this kind of, we'll say, reality TV show, controlling the airwaves, like, whatever it is, however you want to describe it. There's all sorts of nuances there. It's a skill set. And skill sets need to be cultivated because you really did pick on him, but I'll maintain it to pick on the Chuck Schumers of the world. I think part of the discrepancy there is that they, over the course of their career, have built a different set of skill sets, and this is one set of skill sets. So you need to look. It takes time to develop a skill set. I mean, even like biographically in your book with Donald Trump, like, you talk about how Trump spent decades in doing WWE, doing The Apprentice, navigating the tabloid world of New York City, all these different things that built this skill set over time, and then how the current Twitter and all this stuff is him manifesting that skill set in a new social media like Twitter. But, like, it's a skill set, and we might, especially for high office like president, might need to look to people who have had the ability to cultivate that skill set, because it takes time, and it seems like it's the skill set that it's part of the skill set we need. It's like if there was a resume, or if there was a job application for president, and you're like, here are the qualifications, it's now one of the qualifications. Or yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I really like the idea of building a skill set. And I think a smart politician would be trying to build the chops on both the social media side and the traditional media side, so
Right.
they could do that. And so, like, I think what, like, I pointed to Buttigieg. I think what he's doing is a really good job of making himself remembered, even though he's not, he's out of office. He's no longer the transportation secretary. But like, oh, he keeps talking. He shows up on my social media, and he shows up. My mom, I'm living with my parents. My mom watches The View every day. He shows up on shows like that. So you need to do the traditional media, but also have the media savvy. Is another possibility that maybe it's just someone, and this has always been kind of the Hail Mary, at least since Reagan, when like, oh, well, what if a movie star was president? And Reagan's like, yeah, we did that. And Trump's like, what if a reality star was president? And like, yeah, we did that. It's like, oh, so that's when, like when Trump ran for president the first time in 2000, he had floated the idea of Oprah Winfrey as his running mate. And people have wanted Oprah to run forever. And I'm sure there's lots of reasons why she wouldn't want that. But the idea of like, oh, well, maybe it's just somebody who's not a politician who people who are love. And so I could imagine a situation where someone like a Taylor Swift comes out and says, hey, I'm going to run for, maybe she'd run for senator of Tennessee first or whatever, but like someone who comes out of, that we're not seeing from the political world, but comes from the era of entertainment, Taylor Swift obviously knows how to deal with social media. She obviously knows how to deal with large crowds. She obviously knows how to deal with all of the cultivating a persona, to use the term you used. She might not have the political chops, but there might be someone who, if not her, someone like her who's able to make the move, who's able to have those political chops. And we wouldn't necessarily see it coming, although I have heard people talk about Taylor Swift in political circles. That would be a book I'd write.
Maybe if in 2 years' time or 3 years' time Taylor Swift is the running mate, we're gonna say you called it. If that happens, I mean, the way Donald Trump run the Super Bowl in effect politicized Taylor Swift. I would love if that's one of the actual, that's kind of an indirect result of that. Another name I've heard, though I don't know about this particular person, but I will sometimes hear, of all people, like The Rock, so Dwayne Johnson, as mentioned in this context. He also does have a WWE background, so that has that certain type of reality TV, cultivating a persona, and that's I guess like Donald Trump in that sense. But yeah, I guess as a final question, I'm going to ask a bit of a fun question, because we've been talking about so many deep and difficult things. You mentioned that you liked that recently you were watching reality TV that in this case you seemed like you actually liked it, like you weren't just doing it for research because you had to or something. What were some of your favorite moments recently in the that you've been watching that kind of made you think or made you in the reality TV space that weirdly might connect to what we've been talking about cultivating personas?
That's a good question. Maybe I'll start with my favorite reality show I like is Temptation Island. I don't know if you've ever seen it. One could argue that I like it. The premise is you take groups of ostensibly happy couples who then are separated into a boys' side or a men's side and a woman's side, and then in each of those venues, a bevy of model-looking people of the opposite gender are there to tempt them. and they're plied with alcohol, and they go out on dates. And sure enough, every time, at least half of the people cheat on their partners. Why do I like this? I think it really gets at something that I'll see if I can tie this a little bit to the realm of politics. I like it because I watch these people and I think every one of these people is terrible. I think one way of watching that is saying every one of these people is terrible. Aren't you glad I'm not like that? But I don't think that. I think it's like, oh, every one of these people is terrible. But what really, it's not that they're terrible, it's that they just don't really know what they want. When they're presented with a different option, when you go out on a date with somebody new and you put alcohol in front of them and you're on a beautiful desert island and the person you're with is wearing their bathing suit, it's like, oh, well, this is, maybe people are just attracted to sort of the very, very most superficial of things more than anything else. And so that show really gets to me. I'd love to watch Love Island more because it has similar kinds of things of people getting together and being it. It just has too many episodes and they were like 3 hours long. But yeah, I think the thing that I take from reality TV that comes from wrestling is that people love the heel. That people love the bad guy. Trump plays the heel so well, which is sort of amazing that he is giving all the props to Hulk Hogan, because Hulk Hogan never played the heel until in his real life when he turned out he was a terrible human being. But in the wrestling world, he was always the blonde Florida man who was going to save the day from the Iron Sheik or whatever racist trope they were going to throw at him, and he was going to win handily. I don't know if you knew this, but here in Florida, they had the flags at half-mast on a few days ago for his passing. But I wonder what a heel on the left looks like. How can you be a heel and also try to be on the side of marginalized people, right? Because it seems like the people who are the most marginalized don't want to be that if you're mean, then it just becomes cruel. And Trump's fans, well, I don't know, maybe they like the coolness. I think people like cruelty. And maybe I'm coming across as like, oh, my faith in human nature is gone. But like when I watch reality television, I always root for the bad guys. I always root for the heels. I root for the people on Temptation Island. I root for everyone to cheat on their partners because I think that makes for better TV. In real life, like I think cheating is bad and we shouldn't do that. And that I try to live my life according to certain, I'll take an Aristotelian view of like, I'm going to live my life according to certain principles in order to become a better person. But in my reality TV show, like I want the worst thing possible. But I think maybe that's one of the reasons, and I think that's one of the reasons people are drawn to Trump is because he's the worst thing possible. I literally cannot imagine a worse person to be president. Like doesn't seem like a good human. He doesn't seem like he knows politics. He doesn't seem particularly smart or curious or adventuresome or, and even things like you find out things like his favorite meal is a well-done steak with ketchup on it. Like just everything about him is like, oh, I just dislike this person. But I also, from the very beginning, found him compelling. I went to a Trump rally in 2015, maybe 16. It was summer, so I bet it was 2015. And just, I was sort of shocked by the sheer amount of visceral reaction he got. If I can, and like the amount of hatred that people felt and how good it felt to be when there's a part in his standard stump speech where he introduces the media and everyone boos and tells them swears at them and tells them to fuck off. That's the part they like the most. That's the red meat that they're getting. And last summer I went to a Harris Walls rally. I think it might have been one of their first ones they did together. So they were still very happily in the honeymoon stage of the campaign. But the vibe was so much more cheerful and happy, and then they lost by a lot. So maybe cheerful and happy is not what you want at your political rallies. That's a terrible way to end.
There you go. I will say, Well, real quick at the beginning, if I had to guess a reality TV show you would pick, I would not have guessed Temptation Island. I was just no that wasn't even in the wheelhouse of where I would have guessed. But I will say, I understand where you're coming from with the show. I think the closest I can think of to a connection to this is it makes me think about how fickle voters can be. I mean, voting is like in a way, it's like a 4 or 8 year marriage. But the problem is, people's voting decisions are even more superficial and just kind of how they feel that day than anything like marriage or dating or something that we would take seriously. I mean, I guess if it's only 4 or 8 years, maybe that's closer to dating than marriage. But like, yeah, we get enticed by nice looking bodies, and then we vote for that, and then we get that, and we're like, oh. And that's in a way metaphorically saying something that's happening with Donald Trump. With the heel idea, I do think you're right. I think one of the ironies, it's a very good question what a left leaning heel would look like. I mean, the two closest things I could think of is satire, which can be very popular on the left, that could look like, hey, this is the problem, and like there can be very satiric descriptions that are very like bad or like, but that kind of play into that type of heel. Like, of all examples, the Alec Baldwin's character in 30 Rock might be a weird example that like his character was beloved. It was a satire of a left-leaning satire of capitalism and conservatism. But he was a very popular character because of it. The other thing it does make me think about is, I mean, you did hint at this, but like heels, including in WWE, often are minorities. And many times, not only are they appealing characters, but they can be specifically appealing to people in that group, because it's not only, in some cases, there can be not good representation, so that can be some of the major forms of representation for those groups, but also because they're just very flamboyant personalities. I mean, one example I'm thinking of is that Little Mermaid, the villain, Ursula. Ursula, who was in the whatever in the live action, but in the original was very much modeled off of a lot of who did they model her as a character off of? But a lot of different, like a lot of people in the queer community, and maybe specifically in the trans, really gravitate towards her, and that was a basis. A lot of I'm blanking. There was like one or two famous people that she was specifically modeled off of, but
was it like Divine or something like that?
Yeah, it could have been. Oh well, someone could look this up. It's not that hard to find out. But like, people saw her as a depiction of that kind of drag. She and like really in that space really loved her as a character, because she was both flamboyant, she was a heel, she had a strong personality, but also because like they saw aspects of that in her, even though she was the villain. And you know, there's critiques there, like, why is the trans character the villain? But at the same time, people gravitate towards her for this exact energy. And I don't know how to translate that politically. Maybe that isn't translatable in terms of politics, and maybe that's because that's a almost like a subculture that liked her, and not able to be built in a mainstream way. Maybe not. Maybe there's a way that I'm not thinking about. But that was just kind of two early thoughts I had. But yeah. I guess so. Yeah. Any parting thoughts to close this out on?
No, well, I think this is a really interesting conversation, and it's good for me to get my brain working this way. As I told you, I sort of put this stuff down. I've been reading a lot of books about decades and thinking about decadization, and it eventually comes back to this. But it's good to get my mind thinking through the contemporary politics, and maybe this means that I do believe in grassroots activism. So it means that now that I've moved to a new state, once I get my feet on the ground a little bit, I should be working with on the ground resources. I've in the past worked with the here in Florida. I worked with a abortion clinic. I was uh, I was an escort at the abortion clinic, and so I think that any way you can find to get involved with those kinds of things is good and is helpful, because I think especially now people really need people need as much help as they can get. And then I also want to figure out, like, all right, who's going to run against my representative here, who's a total MAGA person, and she comes from the world of, I think she comes from the adult industry in some ways. Not that that's not a good reason to be in politics, anyways, in closing, I would say that I really do believe that grassroots politics are good in terms of helping people. How to get that to translate to larger political wins is something that Obama was able to do, and we need to figure out, like, well, if Obama could do it, then other people could do it, and so maybe move from there. So thank you. It was really fun talking to you, I hope me not being an anthropologist wasn't too much of a difficulty.
Oh, anthropologists are not the only important people in the world. But thank you so much for taking the time. I hope in your new place you're able to get to connect to grassroots mobilizing. Maybe that's our main way of, as we're forming these monocultures in society, especially in social media. Maybe grassroots is one of the best, tried and true ways to actually talk to people from other perspectives and start to form connections that aren't within our monoculture, and start to actually form bridges as the media landscapes is separating us. But yes, thanks for taking the time, and I guess I hope you have a good rest of your hot summer, and as you prepare for this new chapter in your life.
Thanks. Well, thank you very much for having me